8 years ago, my golden child twin brother slept with my girlfriend, which led to my family cutting ties with me. Now, out of the blue, they want to reconnect, and after learning the real reason why, I'm absolutely disgusted. My wife, who's 27, and I were recently invited to spend Christmas with my family. After getting conflicting advice from my friends, one suggested I post here to get unbiased opinions from strangers online. So here I am, for context. I'm a 25-year-old guy, the youngest of 4 kids in my family. Mom is 52, dad is 54. My siblings, Carl, 25, my twin, Michael, 31, and Sarah, 28, are all given fake names here. Growing up, I always felt like the odd one out in my family, and I realized it early on. Everyone in my family is super athletic. My dad played basketball in college, my mom was into volleyball, Sarah played softball, Michael was all about soccer, and Carl was the star running back on the football team. Meanwhile, I was into archery, which my family basically mocked, calling it a weak sport. Getting my parents to come to my archery tournaments was like pulling teeth. They were always so focused on my siblings and barely paid attention to me. Between the ages of 14 and 16, I competed in about 20 tournaments, and they only showed up to 1. They never abandoned me, but they also didn't give me the emotional support they gave to my siblings. As a teen, I hated this. Every time I tried to bring it up, they called me an attention seeker. But this isn't why they eventually disowned me. That happened because of my ex, Amy, who I started dating when I was 15. After about 6 or 7 months of dating, I introduced her to my family, and they all loved her. Even at that young age, I could see a future with her. But 3 years into the relationship, one of Amy's old friends let me in on a secret. Amy had been cheating on me for months. When I confronted her, she admitted it was with my twin brother, Michael. She told me that while she had loved me at first, her feelings for my brother were stronger. I was furious. Later that day, when I confronted Carl about the whole situation at home, I snapped and punched him. I know I shouldn't have resorted to violence, but all the years of built-up resentment just exploded. My family could have pressed charges, and I could have faced a court trial as an adult, but they decided not to. Instead, they sent me to live with my paternal aunt, 2 hours away in a different city. And just like that, I was cut off from the family. After that, I didn't hear from them again. It was tough at first, but with the help of my aunt and her husband, I slowly moved on. I finished high school, went to university in Miami, and got my degree in electrical engineering. Later, I met my wife and we eventually got married. I thought about inviting my family to the wedding, but decided against it to avoid any drama. Afterward, my wife and I bought a house an hour from where I grew up, and a year ago, we welcomed our daughter into the world. About a week ago, I got a Facebook message from my parents saying they wanted to reconnect and inviting us to spend Christmas at their house. I told them I'd think about it, but I might have other plans. After that, I got friend requests from Sarah and Michael, which gave me an uneasy feeling. My wife pointed out that she and our daughter would be spending Christmas at her dad's house if I decided to go, and I agreed. She didn't need any more stress, especially since she's 2 months pregnant. Here's where I need help. Should I try to reconcile with my family, or should I just let it go? I honestly have no idea what to do. On one hand, maybe they've realized how they treated me and want to apologize. But on the other hand, what if they just want me to apologize to Carl, which I have no intention of doing? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Some of the top comments I've received so far have been encouraging me to skip the Christmas reunion. A lot of people have said I should focus on my wife and daughter and maybe visit the family later on at a less stressful time to see if they have any hidden motives. One commenter even suggested they might only want to reconnect because of my daughter, not because they actually want to fix things with me. I agree, it's possible they just want access to their grandchild and don't care about me at all. Several others think it's weird that they're only reaching out now. They had years to contact me, but waited until Christmas? It's suspicious. Some even think it could be about money or something else. They could be trying to make themselves look good to others by pretending to repair the family. Now that I'm successful and have a child. Honestly, I'm leaning toward not going. It feels like they want something from me, and I don't want to get sucked back into that drama, especially after all this time. but part of me wonders if I'll regret it if I don't at least try. I just don't know if I can ever forgive them for turning their backs on me when I needed them the most. After reading the advice, I think I'll skip Christmas with them. I need to protect my own peace and focus on my wife and daughter. I can always try to reconnect with my family later if I choose to, but this whole thing just feels off. Anyway, here's an update. I meant to post this sooner, but life got in the way. 2 days after Christmas, my wife started having severe abdominal pain, and we had to rush her to the hospital. Sadly, she miscarried, and the doctors had to perform emergency surgery to remove the fetus. Telling her what had happened was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. My spouse had to remain for an additional 2 days. To be honest, I've been making an effort to be strong for my wife and daughter, but I'm having trouble right now. Additionally, the original post's revisions. Due to the importance of Christmas, the majority of you who left comments on the page that same day urged me not to spend the holiday with them. I agreed and made the decision to stay with my wife for the remainder of the holidays. Why should I make time for them when they never made time for me? I texted them about this. I thought they would try to disprove me, but instead they expressed respect for my viewpoint and eagerness to see me again after the holidays. I started to investigate my relatives in an attempt to determine the reason of their outreach. Michael works for a big firm in my city as a corporate lawyer, but according to his Facebook page, he was married to his wife in 2016 and the two of them have 2 daughters. It looks like Sarah is wed to a physician. They had a son together and she started her nursing studies 8 years ago. My acquaintance, whose parents are friends with mine, also resides in my hometown. She informed me that Sarah had divorced her first spouse, whom she had been dating for 8 years, due to his mail fraud when I asked her about Sarah. Carl married Amy immediately following high school, and the two of them have 2 children together. Through Facebook, I am unable to precisely ascertain what he or his spouse does for a living, but based on the fact that they purchased a large home during a pandemic last year, it appears that they are not in financial hardship. My mother, who is very involved in the wellness community, and my dad, who appears to be going through a midlife crisis, started to enumerate the reasons why they would want to get in touch with me right now. 1. Cash. And perhaps because my wife's salary was less than my parents' combined pay 8 years ago. She also gives me the impression that money is not a factor because my siblings are not having financial difficulties. 2. Organ donation is a possibility, although it doesn't appear likely. However, someone commented that since Carl is my twin, he might be my most likely match. However, I don't think that's likely because Carl was tagged in a Facebook post scheme just a week before Christmas. 3. They might be contacting me in regards to my kid in order to establish a relationship. But to be honest, I'm not sure. I don't know why they want to meet my daughter since she isn't my parents' first grandchild. I think they learned about my daughter's existence since my wife's Facebook profile was open to the public. She contacted my aunt after making her account private. After I informed her of the circumstances, these change wanted gave me an explanation for why they had reached out to me after all this time to comprehend the circumstances. You have to know why my aunt and I were at odds. My paternal grandparents, a 79-year-old man and a 76-year-old woman, had 4 children. My aunt was the 3rd oldest, and my dad was the 2nd. After graduating from college, my aunt made the decision to live independently and refused to work for the family company. My grandparents cut off all communication with her right away and disowned her. Nonetheless, my grandfather started to get in touch around 4 years ago. My grandfather had been inquiring about me about a month prior, asking about my life, career, and whether or not I was married or had children. After my aunt defended Carl for his actions, she called the grandfather out for inquiring about me. At that point, everything changes. I should be furious because, as my grandfather explained to my aunts, I cheated on Amy with one of her close friends. Being an extreme devout man, my grandfather despises infidelity. My family had informed him that after the person I was reportedly unfaithful to confessed to Amy, she needed the warmth and support of Carl and Sarah. However, as soon as I learned of this, I confronted Carl and Sarah and severely attacked them. I didn't touch Sarah, even though it was she who attempted to destroy Carl and me. And I didn't harm Carl in that way. My mouth fell at hearing this from my aunt. It was unbelievable to me that they detested me so much that they would fabricate a huge, horrible falsehood about me and propagate it. Grandpa was startled, according to my aunt, because he had always believed Carl was a wonderful child when she eventually told him the whole truth about what had really transpired. My granny. Nonetheless, after asking my aunt for my number, she refused to provide it. It explained my parents' and siblings' desire to communicate with me. It comes out that my grandfather had threatened to cut them off from his will if my mom and siblings would not accept my apology for what they had done to me and invite me to the family Christmas meal. To put things in perspective, they contacted me because they would not receive anything from grandfather if they did not apologize for all the times they had hurt me. This is because they know that he is a multimillionaire. What an avaricious group of folks. My aunt told me about this. Therefore, I made the decision to block them all. Why am I supposed to reply to them now? To me, they're all dead. I have to provide for my wife, following her ordeal at the hands of a family who hold me and my in-laws in high regard. But things don't stop here. My work phone rang 3 days after New Year's Eve, and it was an unknown number. Because of my line of work, I'm accustomed to receiving calls from unknown numbers, but when I answered, it was my grandfather. He probably found my phone number on the website of my business. He apologized right away for not making an effort to contact me for the previous 8 years. He apologized to me for missing out on significant occasions like my daughter's birth, my graduation, and the wedding. I didn't mind that he cut me off because we weren't that close before. He called me later and informed me he was cutting off the rest of my family and putting me to his list of people he was dissatisfied with. Sincerely, I'm not sure how to feel about it. Even though the money would be useful, however, I also don't want him to exploit those to try and push a relationship with my daughter. While driving to the call, we had a half-hour conversation. Made me consider the possibility that I could have a positive relationship with my grandfather. However, he later told me something that really infuriated me. He expressed his disappointment to me, saying that my daughter had not considered the family name in the larger picture, following my union with my spouse. It was brought up what last name to use as a couple. We determined as a couple that all of our future children would bear my wife's last name, even if I was unable to take her last name for legal reasons. I then vented to my grandfather, calling him a senile old guy and a bunch of other terrible things, and I vowed to never speak to him again. I won't allow him to exploit the boldness of this man to say that in light of everything I've been through. The funds I was given in exchange for my control, I'll give the money to a nearby charity, even if I end up getting it. This is doubtful, though, as he is a man of broken promises. I've had a pretty difficult few weeks, and I want to come out on the other side. Both my in-laws and my wife have set their Facebook accounts to private. It amazes me what they do to try to get in touch with me. How they would most likely employ a private investigator to look for me. Though you never know, I don't think they are aware of my residence. I've considered obtaining a restraining order, but it will be difficult because families often have attorneys on staff. I was unable to respond to any of the questions in my previous post before it was removed, for an unknown purpose. After this, I'm going to stop using the site for a bit, but I'll try my best to respond to any inquiries for the next day or two. I appreciate all of your advice, and I hope this new year brings you all the best. Second upgrade. Hello, everyone. Let me give you another significant news. And what a roller coaster it has been. I have a lot of weighty stuff to convey, and a lot has transpired since my last article. Now let's begin with my grandfather. We didn't chat a lot, which is largely why our relationship has always been a bit up and down. However, he recently done something that completely surprised me. In fact, he supported my choice to give my children their mother's last name. Not only that, but he's okay with them choosing to change it when they're older. That quote fairly advanced for a person of his generation. To be honest, it was nice to hear him agree with our choice. While my kids were visiting their great-grandpa recently, suddenly he made the decision to unleash a massive surprise. He informs me that I've been included in his will and that I would receive an inheritance of approximately $3 million. Yes, what you just read is true. Millions. It completely stunned me, not just because of the quantity, but also because it became apparent why my estranged family felt the need to rekindle their cozy relationship. I've had to reconsider their motivations in light of the entire inheritance situation. It's pretty obvious now that their sudden interest in getting back in touch was motivated more by the possibility of money coming my way than by a genuine desire to make things right. Realizing that is somewhat disturbing, but not shocking considering our past. I'm feeling very confused and am reminded of all the family drama that has occurred over the years because of this whole situation. Since I wasn't as interested in sports as the others were, I've always been the outsider. I became an archer, something they all found ridiculous. The final straw was my twin brother's betrayal 8 years prior. When he got involved with my girlfriend at the time, I was the one ejected instead of receiving any support. They chose to support him, essentially erasing me from their lives up until this point. As Grandpa modifies his will, they reach out to me now, wanting to rekindle their relationship after a protracted absence. Just a coincidence? Not in my opinion. It went better than I had anticipated when I introduced my kids to Grandpa. They got to meet him, which was kind of nice, and he seemed to be enjoying it as well. He told me many old family stories, which was fascinating and gave me a lot to ponder during our genuine conversation. But it's difficult to get rid of the impression that my family is always up to something, that there's a secret agenda. I now need to decide what to do next. What should I do about this inheritance? Is the money really the only reason I want to jump back into the family drama pool? And how can I handle my grandfather's renewed interest in my life without feeling as though it's all a willpower thing? There's a lot to process here, and I'm attempting to determine how to proceed most effectively. I would be interested in hearing from anyone who has experienced something similar or has any advice. Family dynamics can be challenging, and right now it feels like I'm in the middle of a soap opera. Thanks for letting me vent here. This community has been a great support through all of this craziness. I'll keep you all posted on what happens next. Here quote S to hoping for less drama and more peace in the future. 3 revisions. Hi there, read it. So here's the scoop. Someone, I suspect one of my uncles, who's always been a bit of a blabbermouth, leaked the info about Grandpa's will changing. Suddenly, my Facebook inbox is like a war zone, inundated with messages from family members I haven't heard from in ages. They quote reaccusing me of everything under the sun, from being a master manipulator to tricking a sweet old man into giving me his fortune. Honestly, the creativity of their accusations could fuel a Netflix series. The irony here, I haven't done anything. I barely even talk to Grandpa, let alone have enough influence to change his will. But here we are with me as the family's new favorite villain. Let me paint a picture of the kinds of messages I'm getting. 1. My older sister, who usually can't even remember my birthday, sent me a long rant about family loyalty and how I've betrayed everyone's trust. She ended her message with a passive-aggressive hope you're happy with yourself. 2. Then there's my cousin Dave, who's suddenly interested in reconnecting after years of silence. His message was all nice and nostalgic until he hit me with a shocking regarding Grandpa's will. 3. And let's not forget Aunt Linda, who straight up accused me of employing dark magic. Her words, not mine to influence Grandpa. I didn't sure whether to laugh or be insulted. Honestly, the audacity and the theatrics of it all have turned into my new form of amusement. My wife and I have started taking bets on who's going to say what next. Will Uncle Joe claim I hypnotized Grandpa with some high-tech gizmo? Will Cousin Sarah form a Facebook group to save Grandfather from my clutches? The options are infinite and weirdly amusing. This is the issue. This whole incident has truly put things into perspective. Watching my family lose their heads over money has merely underlined why I stepped back from them in the first place. There quote S something liberating about seeing their genuine colors on full show. It's like validation that I made the proper call by keeping my distance. Besides, money isn't the main concern for me. I'm proud of the life I've created, away from the toxic family environment. I have a lovely wife, wonderful children, and a quiet house. Nothing about an inheritance compares to that. Regardless of the number of zeros appended. For his part, Grandpa doesn't appear to be aware of the commotion he's caused. Who knows? Perhaps he was planning this as the last straw to choose who belongs in the family zoo. When I last spoke with him, his main worry was finding serenity, organizing his affairs and confirming his support for me. It, quote S, strangely endearing, despite creating a tidal wave of familial strife. I'm simply going to sit back and watch how this all plays out for the time being. I am recording every message, in part for legal purposes should things become ugly, and in part because you never know when you might need a good giggle at how ridiculous it is all. I'm not going to respond to this. No calls, no texts, no interaction. Similar like binge-watching a soap opera from the comfort of your couch while cheering on the mayhem. I appreciate you all letting me vent and for the previous advice you have given. It's been quite the journey, and in some strange way, documenting it here helps to lighten the load. I am going to inform you. I quote M, simply taking in the tranquility that comes with knowing what my priorities are right now. But I'll let you know if something weird happens. I'll see you all in the upcoming release. A note for everybody. Hello. Several members of my family have formally ventured into unfamiliar terrain. I'm being sued by them. They think I shouldn't inherit from my grandfather because my kids don't have the family surname. They base their argument on an absurd understanding of entitlement and family legacy that is, to be honest, nothing more than a blatant attempt to siphon off Grandpa's money. That's not all, though. They're also casting doubt on Grandfather's mental state, which calls into question the legitimacy of his will. They said that the only person who would leave a sizable piece of their wealth to a person whose children do not share the family name would be insane. They quote trying to depict me as some kind of cunning con artist who cheated a helpless old man out of his will. When Grandpa learned about the case, he became quite irate. I've always respected the passion he possesses, even at his advanced age. Furious, he called me and told me he had everything under control. He said, "I'm not about to let these greedy opportunists tear my family apart. I've got a good lawyer." Hearing him get so fired up by his own family's behavior was both comforting and depressing. He's now totally committed to this fight, actively cooperating with his attorney to support his choice and demonstrate his mental capacity. He has made it very evident to all that his selections were made with good reason and that they truly reflect his intentions. The family's life has become chaotic due to this case. Motivated by avarice or spite, those members who were previously undecided have now picked sides, with the majority aligned against me. The few who maintain their neutrality are avoiding the conflict, but the conflict at get-togethers with family. It's said that these are through the roof, not that I attend them. Grandpa's strong defense of me and his will has elicited a range of responses. While some are incensed and making more claims, others are surprised that he's making such a strong stance. On the legal front, it's like witnessing a family disintegrate in real time. For us, everything appears to be in order. Grandpa's attorney is among the best in the field, and he has done a great job of recording Grandpa's objectives and mental state. As he amended his will. They have statements attesting to his mental acuity from his doctor buddies and other family members. We've also been ready for the chance that this would take longer than expected. The attorney has organized our defense and made sure that every potential angle is handled with great initiative. Surprisingly tiring meetings, a ton of paperwork, and strategy discussions have been the norm. Everyone is feeling the effects of this entire affair. It's been a tornado of worry, annoyance, and shock for me. Seeing my family turn against me because of money has been both depressing and enlightening. My spouse has been my pillar of support, guiding me through these choppy times and attempting to maintain our children's usual home life. Meanwhile, Grandpa is devastated and furious. Although he is saddened by the division in his family, he is equally adamant about refusing to let greed to triumph. He spends a lot of time ensuring that everything is prepared for the following step with his lawyer. Release number 5. Hi to all of you. And now for the big reveal. The case was won by us, not just any old win either. A landslide occurred. The judge rejected the charges made by my family against my grandfather's will, emphasizing that there was no proof that I had manipulated him and that he was entirely competent to make his own decisions. The worst part is that the court also ordered them to reimburse my legal bills as well as Grandpa's, since their claims were found to be so irrational and absurd. What a twist it is. You would think that my family would reconsider their conduct after losing the lawsuit and having to pay for our legal fees, but it simply set the stage for the next chapter. In this story, several family members began to appear shortly after the verdict, literally knocking on my door, phoning constantly, pleading for my pardon. They wanted me to find a way to persuade grandfather to change his mind and include them again in his will. Compared to their prior aggressiveness and entitlement, it was a complete 180. Telling them to shut up was, I must admit, one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life. I was so indifferent to their pleadings after years of being the bad apple and then being hauled through a legal nightmare. I was quite clear that they were no longer wanted in any way in my life, and that I would not only not support them with grandfather. This time, I was the one holding the match while the bridges burnt. When Grandpa learned about their most recent mischief, he was as determined. With a sneer, he declared that he was not going to change anything in his will. Give them a hard lesson to learn. I could hear the weariness in his stern yet firm voice when he told me over the phone. He had also been affected negatively by the entire affair. However, he felt relieved that justice had been done and that his true objectives had been upheld. Everything about this trip has opened my eyes. I've discovered that respect in deeds rather than blood can sometimes define a family. My wife, my children, my grandfather, and a handful of devoted friends make up my genuine family, the individuals who have supported me throughout everything. All other people are merely background noise, now that the lawsuit is concluded. My attention is on the future. We quote reorganizing a quick trip to celebrate the win and unwind, just my spouse, the children, and me. In terms of grandfather, I've committed to spending more time with the children so he may enjoy his great-grandchildren without having to worry about family greed getting in the way. I want to thank each and every one of you for your help and guidance during this fight. It's been an incredible journey, and writing about it here has been really healing. I'll occasionally check in with revisions, but I intend to write about happier, less dramatic situations in the future. Be careful. And keep in mind that, on occasion, standing up for yourself necessitates standing against others, even family members. Release number 6. Hi to all of you. I'm feeling a little down as I write this letter to you. For those of you who have been following my family's story for some time, things have regrettably taken yet another unexpected turn. My grandfather, a pivotal character in both my life and current narratives, has departed from this life. Not merely the bereavement process is to blame for the difficult times. As usual, there was no break in the family drama to offer us a breather. My grandfather just went away after a short illness. Given his age, it wasn't totally surprising, but it's still a devastating blow. He left me a handwritten note among his last arrangements, and it was heartfelt and enlightening. He wrote it, expressing his sincere regret for the years we lost apart and outlining some of the factors that influenced his choices. He expressed his pride in the person I've become and apologized for not being there for me when I needed him. I will always treasure the letter, even in the midst of our family's turmoil. It was written in his exacting penmanship, with every word picked with care, and it offered a great deal of closure on matters that had troubled me for years. I'm thankful that grandfather used it as a means of bringing people together. As his executor, I witnessed the drama firsthand as soon as his will was made public. Grandpa was very well off, and he left me a sizable legacy, declaring in his will that this was an act of reconciliation as well as love. You would think that my relatives would back off following the recent court struggle that upheld grandfather's mental competency and his ability to select how his wealth was to be distributed. Well, reconsider. My phone started exploding with calls and messages almost instantly. Family members who had been neglecting me and my grandfather for years were now eager to share their condolences and show support for each other. But their real intentions soon became apparent. This is a summary of the types of communications I get. A relative I haven't spoken to in over 10 years told me they're having trouble making their mortgage payments and that their family home might be saved with a little help from the inheritance. Our tight childhood friendship was unexpectedly recalled by an aunt who had once famously claimed I would never amount to anything. She made strong indications that grandfather would prefer it if she invested in her failing company because it would retain the money in the family. During the case, my younger brother, who had sided with others, issued a long, meandering email complaining about how unjust it was that I was keeping family resources that everyone could use. I quote, "V had to be stern, possibly even brutal." I've always responded the same way. No, I clarified that the legacy was not a family slush fund, but rather a legal matter resolved by grandfather's explicit intentions. I've also informed them that whatever the regrettable nature of their current financial or personal circumstances, the prior lawsuit does not warrant my disobedience of Grandpa's last wishes. I refuse to take any chances. My lawyer and I have spoken to make sure that any conversations that might be important to the law are recorded. My spouse and I are also organizing the prudent use of the inheritance. We are considering investing in a few long-term financial instruments, donating to charities, and creating educational accounts for our children. Rather than fostering unrelenting familial greed, we want to respect Grandpa's memory by utilizing this inheritance to support others and ensure our children's future. It, quote, has been an enlightening and demanding experience all around. I now realize how money can distort familial ties into something unrecognizable, and how poisonous dynamics can obscure sincere relationships. I am currently concentrating on my wife and children, and my personal family. Moreover, on applying the lessons discovered from Grandpa's life to the current disputes. I appreciate you allowing me to share this. Through all the highs and lows. This community has been an excellent sounding board and support system. I'm hoping that my next report will be more upbeat, either outlining how we've used the inheritance wisely or outlining our plans for a family vacation that will be far from the drama. Pay attention and be careful. Story 2. I at last revealed my stepsister, who had been ruining my life for 30 years. My family now knows the reality. I'm 40 years old now, married, and have 2 amazing girls. Furthermore, life is not horrible. As a lawyer, I work in a relaxed environment these days. But yeah, it was absolute torture growing up. That was made sure of by my stepsister. I'm not even making this up. I still refer to her as the devil. Sincerely, no other term seems more appropriate. I'll give you a little background. It was only my mom, my older brother, and my younger brother when my dad passed away when I was around 6 years old. Things weren't ideal, but we had each other, and we were managing. Then, when I was about 7 or 8, my mom got married again. She entered the picture with my stepdad, who first gave off the impression that he was good. The devil herself, my stepsister. She was my age, and I could tell she detested us right away. Looking back, I believe she believed we were occupying her space, as if we were drawing her father's attention away from her. I didn't understand that at the time. She then decided it was her personal duty to completely ruin my life. She was always lying and playing mind games. However, she appeared to be the most innocent and sweet girl in public. Behind closed doors, though, people really did believe she was an angel. The true hurt surfaced there. It was blatantly obvious. She would fabricate stories and spew falsehoods to my mother and stepfather about my brothers and me. I stole money from her handbag, just like she once told them. It was an outright falsehood. I had no idea where she kept her purse either. However, they accepted her. And that's only one instance. Years of this kind of thing are what I'm talking about. The worst aspect, too? My stepfather devoured it. He took her words at face value, as if she was impervious to harm. My mother, for her part, agreed to it, perhaps in an effort to maintain harmony. And there I was, stranded in this home where I was always the villain. I had no idea why I was receiving such unequal treatment. It wasn't as though I was unruly or anything. I was, in really, the reverse. I obeyed orders and kept my head down, but nothing was ever good enough. My brothers received pocket money. They were permitted to go out with friends, work part-time jobs, and engage in other typical activities. I have nothing at all. No stipend, no authorization to travel, nothing, no job. That period of time when everyone had cell phones is something I'll never forget. They were huge back then, since it was the 90s. Every student at my school owned one. Eventually, even my brothers acquired them. But me? Nope. Prohibited. My stepfather suggested that I was unworthy of one, whatever that implies. I was forced to utilize the landline as if it were antiquated. In order to stay out of trouble, I had to sneak around if I wanted to get together with pals. In relation to skulking, that was my life for the most part. I had to organize my trips like a prison break if I ever wanted to go anywhere. I was aware that I would receive a stern nay if I begged to go out. Nothing to justify, just be aware. My brother has to handle everything I wanted to do in the meantime, like go on weekend vacations, attend parties, and hang out with pals after school. My stepdad said I was reckless, so I wasn't even permitted to bring people over to our house. The fact that I was prohibited from working was one of the most bizarre things, though. My pals were earning some money, gaining some freedom, and working part-time jobs, not me. I questioned why they said that having money would put me in danger. Perilous? Even so, what does that mean? They never bothered to explain, though. Of course, all I could do was rely on what scraps they offered me, and that wasn't much. After a few years, I'm a college student. Thank God I was able to secure a scholarship, but I still had to work to pay for my education. And I had the good fortune to get hired as an intern by this well-known attorney. Though incredibly cheap, the guy was a genius. I was therefore not getting paid enough to pay for food, rent, or anything else, even though I was gaining fantastic experience. I was having a lot of trouble. You would think that my parents would assist me, wouldn't you? I mean, I was putting in a lot of effort at work and trying my hardest to succeed. But no. Whenever I sought assistance of any type, it would usually result in a heated argument. My stepfather used to tell me that I wasn't working hard enough and that I was entitled to my laziness. I was working so hard to complete my internship, stay in school, and simply get by. However, nothing I did ever satisfied him. The devil, meantime, was residing in a palace. Everything was placed on a silver platter for her. Travels overseas and new outfits, you name it. A brand new automobile upon her high school graduation. I recall when she purchased that vehicle. My stepdad gave her a brand new car like she was royalty, even though she had only passed her driving test. I was enraged, but what choice did I have? Even using the family car to get to my internship was forbidden to me. To get to work, I had to beg friends for rides. I will always remember the day I was able to accumulate enough money to purchase an automobile. It was simple, yet it belonged to me. I was so pleased with myself. I had the hope that my stepdad would notice my responsibility, that I was able to accomplish anything worthwhile. But when I drove up to the home with it, you know what he said? I couldn't park it in our driveway, he told me. I had to park my car at my friend's house across the street, he said, because I didn't deserve to have one. Again, I was incensed, but what could I do? Not only was I living somewhere else, but I had no true control over my own life. Of course, the devil relished every second of it. From across the room, she would smirk at me as if she knew she was winning. And she did, I suppose, in a sense. I was left out in the cold because she had my stepdad wrapped around her finger, and my mom was too afraid to confront him. Funny how some people imagine that growing up in a blended family is like watching a corny comedy where all of the characters become best friends. However, it was a nightmare for me. Not that I didn't make an effort to defend myself. I did, but each time I brought up the unfairness of it all to my stepdad, he would simply make it worse. He would spend hours lecturing me about how unappreciative I was and how I didn't value the sacrifices he made for my brothers and me. In the meantime, the devil continued to lie and manipulate, and I consistently ended up on the short end of the stick. I knew I had to leave college by the time I was halfway through. I felt like I was suffocating in this poisoned environment. I began searching for other employment prospects, preferably with a higher salary than my internship. When I informed my first boss that I was leaving, he was furious, since I had finally landed a job at a company that paid well. He didn't get why I couldn't just keep going, but there was nothing I could do. My family wasn't helping me, and I needed money. I was ejected from the residence shortly after that. After hearing from my stepdad that I was no longer welcome, I packed up my belongings and moved out. I turned away. Furthermore, what do you know? I've never made a better choice than to leave. You would think that things would start to get better after I eventually left the house, wouldn't you? Like escaping my toxic stepfather. And all the turmoil would come to an end with that devil of a stepsister. Well, but it didn't get any better after that. I suppose she wasn't content to only ruin my life at home. She also had to damage everything that was not inside it. Allow me to rewind a little. Things were beginning to improve when I started working at my new job. I was making a respectable salary, had some financial wiggle room, and was looking forward to the future. I could really pay my own rent, purchase my own food, and go on dates with my partner. Things that may seem commonplace, but considering my upbringing, they felt like a luxury. I had assumed that my involvement in family drama was over, but naturally, the devil had other plans for me. She was obsessed with ensuring that I never had a wonderful life. It resembled the first time I started taking better care of myself. She needed to find a means to pull me under. Suddenly one day, my mother phones me. Since of everything that had happened up to that point, I wasn't really on speaking terms with her, but I responded since she sounded desperate. She informs me that my stepsister has been spreading lies throughout the family about how I abandoned them and how I was an unappreciative jerk who abandoned them after raising me. Furthermore, it seemed that she was portraying me as having abandoned her and my stepdad due to some sort of financial hardship. It was unbelievable to me. As I was going about my life, this girl was informing others that I had left the family, as if I hadn't been treated like garbage for years. To make matters worse, she had persuaded the majority of my relatives that I was the bad guy in this whole affair. The phone calls began to come in very quickly. Initially, an aunt who I hadn't spoken to in years inquired as to why I was acting so callously. Next, it was the brother of my stepfather. This guy was really angry with me, calling me a shame and urging me to return home to my family. What on earth was the appropriate item to return and receive the same treatment as dirt once more? It was like talking to a brick every time I tried to convey my side of the story. Nobody desired to listen to it. They had already fallen victim to the devil, so they took her word for it. She seemed to have this kind of control over people. She had such ease manipulating them, as if they were too lazy to inquire about her falsehoods. I was stuck defending myself in the interim, and nobody gave a damn. Things were going well at work, but the ongoing stress from all the family drama was getting to me. It seemed like there was a cloud above me. And regardless of how hard I tried to concentrate on my relationship or career, it was always nagging at the back of my mind. I was getting calls or texts from relatives every day, guilt-tripping me about family values and how I should make apologies. However, reparations for what? For defending my own interests, for getting out of a bad circumstance. My relative once referred to me as someone I was genuinely close to as a child. I reasoned that perhaps he would listen to me and be different. But no. Same narrative. He began to rant about how I was breaking up the family, how my stepsister and stepdad were having trouble, and how I was simply standing by and allowing it to happen. He gave the impression that they were about to lose the house or something, but there was one thing I was not going to overlook. I thus gave my mother a call to find out the truth. I asked her directly if they were experiencing financial difficulties. It was strange that she hesitated because my mom was usually honest about things like that. Then she said, no, they weren't having any difficulties at all. My stepdad had actually recently purchased a new boat for himself. Here was my stepsister circulating reports that they were struggling to make ends meet. It dawned on me then that it was more than simply my moving out of the house. Control was at issue here. The devil found it unbearable that I had managed to escape and was now able to support myself. She needed to control me, and lying and manipulation were the only ways she knew how to do it. She was deceiving my family more than once. She was lying to everyone in her vicinity in an attempt to paint me as the villain and make herself out to be the victim. The most annoying thing was that she would go out of her way to portray me as a failure. She would spread the word to everyone that I was having trouble at work, wasn't making any money, and that my relationship was failing. It was all untrue. However, that didn't deter her. She needed everyone to think that my performance was inferior to hers. Because if I was in pain, she was winning in her warped thinking. She wasn't content to simply turn the family against me, of course. She needed to go one step further. At work, I started to hear gossip about myself. Individuals would approach me, claiming they had heard I was careless, that I didn't take my work seriously, and that I was getting into trouble outside of the office. It didn't take me long to determine the source of these rumors. Once the devil learned where I worked, she began to tell my colleagues falsehoods about me. She seemed to have no boundaries. She would stop at nothing to destroy me, even if it meant interfering with my work. It seemed inconceivable. To dispel the rumors before they could have an impact on my employment, I had to put in twice as much effort to establish my worth at the company. It felt like a daily game of chicken and egg, never knowing when the next big lie would be revealed. Pondering who would hear and take it seriously. One day, I recall, My supervisor dragged me into his office. He stated he wanted to know if everything was okay because he had heard some worrying things. I could tell he didn't quite trust me when I had to sit there and describe the entire family scenario. Really, who would? It sounded completely ridiculous. My stepsister was disseminating false information about me to everybody who would listen, and I was forced to explain myself while sitting there for things that never even happened. I knew then that I had two options. I could choose to ignore every lie I was told, or I could keep battling it. I was worn out from the whole ordeal, and it seemed to get worse the more I retaliated. So I made the decision to back off. I gave up attempting to protect the family. I gave up trying to explain myself. Permit them to hold any beliefs they choose. I knew the reality at the end of the day, and it was all that was important. However, the fact remains that the pain persisted. Despite my best efforts to put it all behind me, I was still affected by it. The lies never change. The experience of being the outsider, a stranger within my own family, it wore me down. I had created this entire existence for myself apart from that poisonous residence. But even from a distance, the devil still had her claws in me. I realized then that there was more to this than just me going. She would not give up until she had damaged me beyond all recognition, and she was going to succeed if I didn't exercise caution. Things abruptly spiraled out of control and into pure lunacy by the time I felt like I had some calm in my life. My stepsister's attempts to merely complicate my life at work and with my family weren't enough. No comma, she needed to go above and above, and it got really ugly this time. I suddenly started to hear rumors, nasty ones, things to raise the temperature of anyone's blood. And not just the tired tropes about me being a lousy son or careless. No, she did not stop there. All of a sudden, I was being whispered about as dangerous. That I had taken action. Disgusting things. I'll tell you where this is headed, even though I'm sure you can already guess, since I still find it unbelievable. My phone began to overflow with texts from some extended family members one day, folks I hadn't spoken to in a long time. I initially assumed it was simply typical family gibberish. However, the messages grew increasingly intense. It wasn't like that usually. Would you mind attending the family dinner? Alternatively, you ought to talk to your mother more often. These were accusations of the most heinous kind directed against me. My cousin, with whom I had not spent much time as a child, was accusing me of molestation. Yes, what you just read is true. She said that I had abused her 20 years prior, and now she was abruptly informing everyone in the family about it. I was so shocked that I was genuinely unsure of how to react. I had the impression that something overwhelming had struck me. She wasn't the only one, of course. It seemed like the demon my stepsister had been whispering in everyone's ear was accusing me of abusing several family members when we were younger. One of her worst falsehoods was that I had abused a different cousin as well, and she even made the implication that I would be dangerous for my own girls. Imagine receiving texts from relatives who think such nonsense exists. Ready to pursue me was one of my uncles, who happened to be the father of one of the cousins I had allegedly injured. He was that enraged. And who was to blame for him? If you were informed that a member of your family has been abusing your child for years, would you not be infuriated by the fact that he accepted it so quickly? Have you just made everything more twisted up overall? In my heart, I knew it was all her fault, my stepsister's devious scheme to bring me down. However, how can one even start protecting himself against something so ridiculous? It wasn't as though I could simply arrive and declare, "Hey, this is all made up." It's not what anyone wants to hear. Once the lies are public, they remain like a persistent stain. I tried to ignore it at first. Perhaps if I simply said nothing, the lies would eventually end. However, I was mistaken. Things got out of hand very quickly. A few relatives severed all ties with me. People who, when I was younger, I considered to be my friends now regarded me like a monster. I felt like I was being shunned even more by the family. It was more than I could handle. I was aware that I had to act quickly or else this would consume me. I thus took the only action that occurred to me. I visited my parents' home. At first, I had no intention of confronting them, but I knew I had to face this catastrophe head-on before it utterly ruined me. When I arrived at their home, I could see my mother was taken aback by my presence. I didn't care about any of that right now, even though we hadn't exactly been on good terms since I moved out. All I had to do was correct the record. Before my stepsister's falsehoods could further damage them, I needed them to hear the truth from me. I felt like my whole body was trembling as soon as I placed them down. Although I don't get anxious readily, something about this felt unusual. I was about to dump some of my most intimate belongings, things I wasn't even sure I would want to speak out in the future. However, I was at a loss for what to do. I filled them in on everything. I began by accusing my stepsister of disseminating false information that I had learned from our cousins. I ensured them understood it was all a fraud. I then dug a little further. I disclosed to them the details of my past that might have been used against me. I discussed topics with my parents that I never would have thought to bring up. Similar to how my stepsister once mentioned a cousin who wasn't even linked to us at the time. Before we even realized we were related, we had shared a kiss as teenagers. Furthermore, it was a harmless event that never progressed above that. I also told them other topics I figured they might be interested in knowing, such my previous experiences with marijuana experiments. That may not seem like much, but my folks are deeply religious. Saying the term weed in front of these hardline, ultra-conservative people was like setting off a minefield. However, I was aware that I had to take this action to prevent my stepsister from using anything against me. I reasoned that she wouldn't have any weapons left if I spoke the truth about everything. It was difficult. My folks merely sat there in disbelief. My mother was at a loss for words. It surprised me that my stepdad wasn't screaming for once, and to be honest, I was a little scared. Normally, he's the first to level charges, but that particular instance, they paid attention. I felt like I had just finished a marathon by the end. Though I was mentally and physically worn out, I could tell that they had changed. I don't even remember how long it has been, but for the first time, they really seemed to believe me. They were beginning to doubt what my stepsister had told them over the years, and I could tell. I received no apology or anything of the sort. Not quite, but after leaving their place that evening, I could tell something had changed. I fell hard. The emotional burden of it all was overwhelming. I had become so stressed out that I ended up in the hospital a few days later with pancreatitis. Although it was frightening, in retrospect, I believe it was simply my body telling me it was time. In actuality, though, I wasn't finished yet. I was determined not to let her win, even though I knew there was still a long way to go. She may have believed she could destroy me, but I understood for the first time that I could fight back. After all of that, when my stepsister started circulating false information about my hospital scare, I came to a crucial realization. She would simply keep coming up with new strategies to bring me down if I tried to challenge her directly. It was like handling a snake. It slithers away the more you try to grasp it, aggravating the situation. I required an alternative strategy. I was done fighting with her. All I had to do was allow her to go to pieces. I began conversing with my half-brothers as well as my brothers. Over the years, we'd all had our fair share of issues with her, though most of them hadn't been as personal as mine. Nevertheless, they were aware of her nature. We had a plan, but it wasn't some elaborate scheme or anything of that sort. It was actually rather easy. We were all planning to simply ignore her. Nothing, no interactions, no texts back, no phone calls, nothing. We reasoned that she would eventually make a mistake on her own if she didn't hear back from us. At first, it wasn't simple. She persisted in trying to outpace our responses. She once texted a really lengthy message to our family group chat. She told all the same lies in it, such as how I was the troubled child and that I had betrayed the family for everything they had done for me. She even attempted to incite my brothers against me by claiming things like, he was always selfish in the back. Traditional manipulation. Correct? Here's the problem, though. We all declined the offer. There was not even one reply in the group conversation. We all simply let her babble. She seemed more frantic when no one jumped in to support her, but you could tell she was expecting someone to. Actually, seeing her struggle to keep control was kind of nice. Silence was the hardest part, though. I felt the need to defend myself every time she sent a foolish message or made a wild assertion. I wanted to yell about how full of shit she was from the rooftops. However, I knew that was precisely what she desired. She enjoyed a good drama. She needed my response. I said nothing, therefore. My brothers also did the same. To be honest, I found it somewhat annoying. I had spent years attempting to establish my credibility, clear my identity, and persuade others of the truth. But now I was saying absolutely nothing. In actuality, it was the complete opposite of what I felt like I was offering her. She spiraled further the less I interacted with her. Approximately 1 month into the entire silent treatment plan, she began experimenting with other strategies. She attempted to play the victim at first. "We're all teaming up against her," she texted our mother. How her own family had abandoned her. Subsequently, she began contacting my stepdad, sharing the same pitiful tales about how she was the one who was constantly left out and how she couldn't figure out why others were treating her this way. Naturally, at first, my mom and stepdad accepted it. Why would this time be any different? After all, they had been supporting her show for years. But when I gave them the rundown, something had changed. In fact, I received a call from my stepdad asking for advice, the same guy who used to yell at me for being unappreciative. "Is that really true? What shall we do?" he asked. "She's giving the impression that we're treating her unfairly." I was honest with him. Like she always did, she was playing them. I told them that they needed to quit focusing on her if they were serious about getting through this. "Look, I know you've been trying to maintain peace for years, but that's not what this is about anymore. Control is the issue here. She's going to want a mile if you give her an inch." They needed some persuasion before they agreed to give it a try. Not as often as in previous years. They gave up complying with her requests. She was clearly going crazy since they had ceased replying to her pity parties. But she was not one to give up quickly. Her style isn't like that. She attempted to take things further. Suddenly, one day, she wrote my wife a long, heartfelt email, like using theatrical words and acting all worried. She began rambling on about how concerned she was for our girls. It was implied that they shouldn't have me around. She made an attempt to appear empathetic, as though she was merely trying to be a good sister-in-law and offer assistance. What she was doing was very plain. Her intention was to create a rift between my spouse and me. Perhaps she believed my wife was unaware of the whole truth. Perhaps she believed she could persuade her that I was a bad person and that it would ruin my marriage. But my wife, she's intelligent. None of it was fooling her. She presented it to me after reading the email, and we both chuckled at how ridiculous it was. Subsequently, she executed precisely what we had been doing all along. Nothing. Not a reply. Not even acknowledged. Nothing but quiet. Before time, the other members of the family began to realize this. One of her staunchest supporters, my stepdad's brother, quit returning her texts. After her charges, my cousins had not spoken to me until recently, but they began to inquire about how I was doing. It appeared as though she was rousing them from her enchantment. I realized then that we were winning. She became more and more frantic the longer we ignored her. She resembled a balloon that was expanding due to her own fury, ready to burst at any moment. It felt like there was more pressure every day that passed without an answer. She was really close to losing it all, I could tell. We used the same approach for family gatherings. If she appeared, we were courteous but aloof. We stayed silent about her. She would try to get a rise out of us by making these passive-aggressive remarks, but we wouldn't bite. We talked to her as if she were a stranger, keeping our exchanges brief and non-judgmental. It did to her, this silent treatment. It was visible to me. She was unable to tolerate not having authority or being the focus of attention. She got more insane the more we disregarded her. She began to express her anger in little ways, such as by sending sporadic SMS to strangers, accusing them of betraying her or uploading strange, cryptic remarks on social media. However, none of it was successful. She went crazy since we didn't say anything. She was barely hanging on by the end of that first year. Once the family favorite, she had become someone no one wanted to deal with. What's the best thing then? All I needed to do was remain silent. But it was far from over. I was sure she would make a mistake at some point. It was just a question of time. Now, let's fast forward to this entire silent treatment plan and go back roughly 2 years. At this point, I could see everything occurring right in front of me. My stepsister, or the devil, as I like to call her, was falling apart. She started making more mistakes and growing more frantic the longer we ignored her. However, none of us had anticipated what was going to occur at my stepbrother's wedding. That was the point at which it all went haywire. For the family, the wedding held great significance. It was my stepbrother's wedding, and almost all of the family was invited. Although I knew I would eventually have to visit my stepsister, I wasn't particularly looking forward to it. We would eventually cross paths. I assumed that Like we had been doing for the previous few years, we would simply maintain our distance and keep things polite. When my wife and I arrived on the wedding day, things first seemed to be going well. You've been to enough weddings. Everyone is having a good time, catching up, snapping photos, and acting as though nothing is wrong. Naturally, though, the devil was quick to try to incite some drama. She was skulking about and trying to talk to people, but most of them were ignoring her when I saw her. After all those years of controlling people and being the center of attention, it was honestly sort of pleasant to see that no one wanted to be around her, but she wasn't going to let it go that simply. She cornered my wife midway through the reception. Although I wasn't present for the entire event, my wife later told me about it. The devil appeared to be prepared to reveal a significant secret, as evidenced by the arrogant expression on her face. She leaned in and began whispering falsehoods about me, including that my wife should exercise caution around me and that I posed a threat to our girls. She was attempting to sow doubt in my marriage in an attempt to destroy it. She genuinely believed that she was going to surprise us. However, my wife didn't even bat an eyelid. She let her babble on for a while before simply grinning, turning to face me and telling me everything. We both realized that action was needed. This was her major error. The demon had pushed too far. This is when things started to get interesting. I had stored up screenshots of her insane texts and lies throughout the years from putting up with her nonsense. I had not intended to use them at the wedding, but after learning of the behavior she had with my wife, I decided that now would be the ideal moment to put an end to this. I took out my phone, checked out the group conversation that contained almost all of my family, and sent the screenshots. Yes, I did expose her at that same moment. The group chat started to glow like a Yuletide tree. People were rather taken aback. After so much time spent playing the victim, there was now concrete evidence of her manipulative nature. I didn't even need to give an explanation. The screenshots were quite persuasive. She had attempted to destroy my marriage, dubbed me a threat to my own children, and circulated false information about me abusing our relatives. Expressed entirely in her own words. The devil was quick to grasp what had transpired. Her expression when I saw her looking at her phone was priceless. She appeared paler, as if she realized she had been apprehended. Nevertheless, she did what she normally does rather than owning up to her mistakes or making an effort to apologize. She intensified her efforts. In the group chat, she responded, attempting to con everyone by claiming that I was exaggerating and that I had always been the theatrical one. Traditional deception. But it wasn't successful this time. It was not purchased by anyone. My uncles, cousins, and even a couple of my aunts began criticizing her one by one. Her lies had grown old to them. Weary of the years she'd spent ripping our family apart. It appeared as though a floodgate had opened and everyone was at last recognizing her true identity. Individuals who had been silent for so long began to tell their own tales of how she had taken advantage of, lied to, and manipulated them. Although it was harsh, it was definitely past overdue. She made another error right when I thought things couldn't get much weirder. We should keep this between us. She contacted my wife once more, pleading with her to remove my messages from the group chat. Really? What on earth was she thinking? That text was instantly screenshotted by my wife, who then shared it back to the group chat for everyone to see. It was game over at that point. The devil ran out of tricks. There was no turning back from the way she had exposed herself in front of the whole family. After then, there was silence in the group conversation. Everyone had run out of things to say. It seemed as though we were all trying to comprehend that the truth had finally surfaced after years of deceit and manipulation. My mother gave me a call a few days later. She had a different voice, as if she was still processing everything that had transpired. "I believe I've been mistaken about you for a very long time," she said. "I had no idea how terrible things actually were." Although that wasn't a true apology, it was the closest I'd ever received. To be honest, it was nice to hear her acknowledge it at last. However, she also asked me a question for which I am still at a loss for words. "Would you forgive me?" she asked. "After 30 years of being the black sheep, the scapegoat, and the person everyone pointed the finger at, really? Should I give her the benefit of the doubt? It's not simple. I doubt I'll be able to forget anything that transpired. However, I also don't want to live my entire life harboring that much anger. In all honesty, I have no idea what kind of relationship I want to have with my family in the future. There has been a significant change in how they perceive me compared to the past. However, I now need to learn how to handle this new dynamic. Furthermore, I'm not sure if I want to get close to them or maintain my distance, as I have for years. All I know is that I feel like I'm in control for the first time in my life. I no longer have to live under the shadow of my stepsister's deceit. It's also a great relief. I nearly lost everything because of it: my family, my work, and my well-being. However, it was worthwhile to ultimately reveal her true nature. So indeed, that is the current state of affairs. At least I'm free of the devil, albeit I'm still working out the whole family issue. And I feel free, really free for the first time.